everyone's heart, access to clean water. What have we done in order to make sure that everyone has clean water, and what needs to be done? What are the challenges, and what can be done to make sure that we achieve the targets as set by the government of having 100% of access to clean water by 2024. Before I introduce my panelists, we have a very short report that was compiled recently as the media houses toward water treatment plants around Kigali. And here is the report. When I come back, I'll be introducing my panelists.
In Nyarugenge district, there are 3 water treatment plants in Nzove area, which produce about 140,000 cubic meters of water from Nyarongo River. However, water that makes it to the citizens is about 80,000 cubic meters, yet the desired water demand is 145,000 cubic meters. Some citizens, however, continue to express dissatisfaction of lack of water. Water comes once in a week, and we spend another week without water. In my area, water comes on Monday only. WASAC needs to first verify who it gives water and the costs. WASAC says some of the major challenges that affect citizens' access to water are being dealt with as priority. The Director General of WASAC, Engineer M.M. Zola, said that no citizen would lament of water next year. When you look at the money we spend for water to be dispersed to people using electrical power, we spend about 40% of all income per year. It's about 9 billion on electricity. In Kigali City, we want to build big water reservoirs in case there is water shortage, installing new pipes to replace the old ones, installing big pipes as the old ones were smaller, installing water pipes in upcoming residential areas. All that will cost us a budget of 60 billion Rwandan francs.
Ahantu hagiye guturwa cyangwa ari guturwa cyane kugira ngo abantu bazajye bahasanga amazi. Ibyo byose inyengo y'imari iragenda ikagera muri miliyari 60 z'amanyarwanda.
WASAC says there are 16 water treatment plants in the country, but due to old infrastructures, the water does not reach citizens accordingly. In Kigali City, with new infrastructures and projects that will cost about 60 billion, it is expected that in the year 2020, every household will have access to clean water.
There you go. You have it. At least you have an introduction of the issue we're going to be talking about tonight. Now, quite a number of issues. Access to clean water, of course, issues that have to do with service delivered by WASAC. And then there is also new prices that were set by Rura recently, increasing water prices as if the services were good. But those are the sentiments and questions and comments that have been set out on Twitter, and that's why we actually decided to hold this debate and the conversation to get to know the genesis of the water crisis in this country. Now, what you need to do is make sure you tweet your comments, your opinion, but remember to add the hashtag InFocusRW to make sure that we easily track and trace your comments. Now, my panelists, or my guests tonight, you've seen them probably on Twitter earlier today. First one, on my immediate left, Dayo Nwari, the person who actually sent out an open letter to the president outlining some of the issues that we're going to be discussing out tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I hope you're well. Now, right after that, we have Juliet Kalitanyi, a concerned citizen, an activist when it comes to water. Thank you so much, Juliet. Juliet is the one who actually asked for this debate. You have it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, here.
And we have, right after Juliet, we have Giselle Umhumza, Deputy CEO, WASAC. Thank you so much for joining us, Giselle.
Welcome.
I hope you had a wonderful weekend.
Yes, I had one.
And of course, Patrick Nyirishema, Director General of Rura.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Let me start with the two of you. I want to believe that you pay for your water bills.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, and looking at what you pay and what you get, are you satisfied with the services?
So as a citizen, I would be demanding a better service when it comes to water. rightfully so. And I think we've seen citizens speaking out. Now, beyond myself, of course, water is a basic human right. You can live without many other things, but water, absolutely not. All of us need water. And so, indeed, it's rightfully a topic worth discussing tonight and all the debate around it at the moment.
Riza.
Indeed, I demand more. I think there is a room for better service. And I believe we are striving to provide that. And yes, I do pay my bills. And yes, I have seen an increment in my bills as well.
There, and Juliet, if they demand, they would demand for more. But here they are increasing prices. What does that mean? Which message does that send?
Well, for one, it sends the message that WASAC is purely cost recovery oriented. And there's a story behind that. But first of all, let's look at what WASAC is here for, which is to provide this country's people with water, with safe, clean drinking water. And that's not happening. I question their allegation that they pay bills like we do. I doubt that. And I'm also sure they do not face the same scarcity that the rest of the nation faces. I know for a fact that there are areas where this is not really a topic. Whereas if you go to areas like Kimironko, Kabiza, Remira, it's like a desert out there. So if you're living in a city where water comes to you like a lottery, basically, it's audacious, I find, to mess with the tariffs in any way. So let me just leave it at that, and the night is young. We are on this topic.
Your experience, Juliet?
Yes, I live in Gihojere, in Remera. We get water 3 times a week, and that's really not enough. Because I believe that water, having access to clean water, is our right. And if you have to get it at a higher price, then are they meeting our basics need? Because if someone has to pay a lot to survive, then what about the rest? And it's going to create even more problems, because if I can't access water, then I'll have other solutions, and that is unclean water. So, because that's cheaper. And I believe that it's going even to create more problems, diseases, theft, and so on.
But they always ask you to harvest water when it rains.
Yes, of course, but that's not enough, because we need to have water in abundance. Like, you have water, you don't have to worry, like, okay, it's ending, let me use, Yeah.
So, Mr. Patrick, why did Rura set new prices? And if you can break down, because I was trying to look through the paper, and there's piped, there is diesel, there is prices. I could not understand the prices. So help us break down the prices. And why did you, of course, together with WASAC, set new prices?
So thank you very much. First, I think it's worthwhile to note that the tariff was actually done in February. That's when we published new tariffs. We talked about them. WASAC also did a campaign around that. But I think people may pay more attention when they get the first bill, because it was applied in March. And since people pay after 1 month, that means actually beginning of April. So this was actually 2 months after we published the tariffs and even explained everything about the tariffs. So I wanted to clear the misconception that we either set it now or we set it and never talked about it. That is completely not true. Now, there are a number of things that are important to note here. On the one hand, water is a basic human right. Everybody needs water, as I said earlier. And it's a very sensitive topic. We want clean water that is available and that is affordable. On the other side, this water needs to be produced. It comes from a source, it needs to be treated, it needs to be pumped, it needs to be distributed. So there's a cost attached to distributing this water. when we set this new tariff, it was informed by a number of things. Number one, we did a proper analysis that showed us that the tariff that was there then was actually under cost. While we're going through this process, it also so happened that there was a peer review by, we are part of an association of regulators, 8 regulators in the region, Eastern and Southern Africa. And every year they go into one country and they do a peer review. And what we had observed through doing analysis and numbers was actually validated by these 8 regulators visiting here. Because one of the observations they made was that the tariff that was there at the time, this was October last year, was actually under cost. And it was difficult to see how WASAC would sustain itself in the long haul. So that is one point of reality that we have to handle and deal with. The second one is that government did a reform of the former EWASA and separated water and electricity. And the intention was to create sustainable corporations that are operationally efficient, that are also sustainable in the long haul. And so when we set out to do the tariff, we wanted to accomplish a number of things. Number one, we wanted to make sure that WASAC, the tariff is cost reflective, meaning that whatever cost goes into producing this water and distributing it is actually recovered through the tariff. I'll give you an example. If they spend close to 9 billion on electricity, which this is a payout to EUCL, and they have generated approximately 20 billion, that gives you an idea, just the cost of pumping water alone, what it is. And so one key objective in the tariff review was to make sure that we have proper cost recovery, and also making sure that WASAC as an entity can sustain the service that we need. We are, of course, rightfully so, a lot of complaints about the current quality of service, but will only get worse if we demand better service and they have no resources to actually improve the service that they're delivering. So that's the dilemma of a regulator, because you also have to be sensitive to the citizen at the same time. You need to make sure the entity can sustain itself. Another key consideration was, again, from the fact that water is a basic human right, was to make sure that we are sensitive to low-income earners. People have limited means. That's why we included what we classify as a lifeline tariff. That is the first bracket of up to 5,000 liters per month. People consuming that amount of water per month, they have a special tariff, which is 340 francs for 1,000 liters of water. When you consume more than 5,000 and up to 20,000, you go into a higher bracket, which is 720 francs per cubic meter, which is 1,000 liters. If you go beyond 20,000 up to 50,000 liters, which is really a lot of water. That's on average, if I put it in a daily language of a citizen, that's about 83 jerrycans of water on average per day, if you're in that other higher bracket. Then it goes 845 francs per 1,000 liters of water you consume. So the sensitivity to the low-income earners and affordability is reflected in the lifeline tariff that we set for that first bracket that I explained. And then we also put in the element of the need for more investment, the need for improved quality of service, access, supply, so that in the long term, not only do we improve, but we ensure that the service is sustained. So this is the logic of setting a tariff. Now, we don't just sit in Rura and set a tariff. A study is done. We do a lot of consultations. We work with what they call the Consumer Association representative. We do wide consultations across the policy-making level, whether it is local government, whether it is, of course, Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Finance, and all the others, RDB, Minicom, who are concerned about the industry and all the other people. So in that whole process, at the end of it all, then we determine the tariff which we publish. So that is the tariff in a nutshell.
Sure. Giselle, in 2016, when Zove 2 was being commissioned, one official from WASAC said that by 2019, Kigali will have 100% access to clean water. Well, in 2019, what is the state of affairs?
Thank you so much. The state of affairs is actually that we haven't reached the 100%. By 2016, we were expecting to venture in some huge investments, which unfortunately delayed a bit, but today we have them. And for Kigali alone, we have a project that is now set to be completed by December 2020. The contractor is on board. And yes, we are going to delay for 1 year, but at least surely we're going to reach there.
So 2020.
And 2020, December 2020. And why am I talking about this? Is actually that we have started, I think we signed the contract sometimes in February, March, and we got close to 60 billion to do that solely for Kigali. And it's a project for 568 kilometers that includes areas where we particularly are constrained, and which Dayo rightfully put forward. The area of Busanza, Kabeza, Rubirizi, where Kanombe, it's actually now Kanombe branch. Areas of Kimirongo, when you go beyond where we had the prison, and Kwamushimire and so forth. And for these ones, we have a specific line of 71 kilometers that is actually made of a forwarding infrastructure, which is going to forward water that is coming from the plant in Kanzenze, the 40,000 cubic meter per day that we are building in Kanzenze. And that one is actually going to serve and increase the water that we have for the moment. And I would like to remind the audience that we have actually a kind of a gap between our supply and the demand. We have a supply of 95,000 when the demand is close to 145. So when you add up, when you do the quick mathematics, we have that kind of gap that we need to fill. And we believe, and we've been constrained by the narrative that we've been having about network, and this project is actually going to come and bring a remedy for that specifically.
So I want to know, where are we now in terms of access to clean water?
In terms of access to clean water, and I will come back to the national statistics, we actually have, when it comes to clean drinking water in urban areas, within 200 meters, we are at 70%. In rural areas, we are at 53.7%, and within 500 meters.
There are
So
people who are actually saying that 70+ percent is the infrastructure, not access to clean water. I don't know if Dayo and Juliet are going to believe those numbers.
Yes, but there is also one thing that we have to remember here. For you to have the service, we have the infrastructure that convey that service. Yeah. Now, when I have 70% coverage of infrastructure, that is already a basic. That once I have the required, of which I'm actually working on, for the moment I'm working on the production, I'm done with the production and I'm working on the network. So once I will be having this water, this amount of water, then I will be having the conveying infrastructure to convey that water.
So we don't have water, we have the infrastructure.
No. We have the infrastructure at 70%. We have the water that we still need to bridge the gap between the 95,000 that we have and 145 that we have to bridge.
There.
I always find it interesting the way these guys play with numbers. I'm glad you pointed out the 70% issue. It is indeed 70% coverage. That's the hardware of WASAC. But there's no mathematics in this world that can say we have 70% access from the consumer side when we are far below that. Okay, so let me just touch on what DG talked about. Cost recovery from tariffs. It's a bit odd, I find. It's bizarre to expect any utility, water utility in the world, to operate cost recovery through tariffs. It's not done. It's not feasible financially. It's like when you expect a cinema to break even just by ticket sales. That's the most minimal part of your income. So cost recovery on the backs of the users, especially in a country as poor as ours, where if you check the statistics for Rwanda, the National Institute of Statistics, you find that the median income, the average income of a Rwandan household is 50,000 francs per month. So what you're basically telling us is that WASAC is going to juice those people of their 50,000 every month so you can be cost effective. I don't know which fantasy world we're living in where that is a viable approach to operating a water utility. Bearing in mind that it's not a private enterprise. This water belongs to us. WASAC itself belongs to us. So in essence, we're the owners of something that we're being leached for. You can't sit here with a straight face and tell me we have 70% access when you know you're playing with the numbers. It's 70% network. It's like you're saying there's enough MTN masts, but no one has phones. So you're saying there's 70%. You've not really done anything for us. All you're doing is back-end work. But the consumer
back-end is going to deliver.
Back-end is of no use.
They're setting infrastructure.
Listen, I've been here for like 6 years in this country. And every year I open the newspaper, I see promises from WASAC. This year, there'll be 100% coverage, 100% access, no more scarcity. Year after year after year. This is 2019. Now they're telling us what's the next target? 2020, 2021, 23. We'll be here again in a couple of years talking about the same thing. And they tell us access, coverage.
Juliet, hearing about the infrastructure that has been set up, the network, aren't you optimistic that the target is going to be reached and you're going to be having water in the nearest future possible?
From the money they're squeezing from us that we can't afford.
They're recovering, cost recovery, to make sure that they invest more. And
people who are not getting the water that they're
trying to
So, okay, of course, the cost recovery.
Provide the water if you want to recover costs.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree. But we need to separate issues. I 100% agree water needs to be accessible. Supply needs to be sufficient. People need water. I also live in Chichuchiro, although it's not as bad as Kabeza, but we do have water shortages from time to time. So supply is one thing. But on the other end, we cannot put the heads in the sand and say, let's not talk about cost recovery, because if there's a cost to producing this water, it means that money has to come from somewhere for this to be done. Now, if it doesn't come from the tariff, the only other place it will come is from maybe taxes. Government has to subsidize. Now,
worldwide.
Now, this is a policy debate, because when you go there, then it's a policy debate, because then you also need to subsidize electricity. Then people also need to move. Public transport is another utility. Then you also need to subsidize transport. So how far does it go? Now, I'm not a policy maker, so I'll not speak for the policy makers, but when it comes to water, the cost recovery we're talking about is actually operational cost recovery. Government is already investing a lot of money in terms of the infrastructure itself. And in fact, if you look at the cost of infrastructure, that is 73.8% of the cost. So the operational part of producing this water, which is 26.2%, is what we're talking about cost recovery. Now, if government has more resources and can be able to put more money into subsidizing the consumer, then of course we can take the cost down. But I wanted us to separate issues and first of all agree in principle that we cannot expect to have water if the cost of producing the water and distributing it is not covered. Now,
I have an interesting one.
Yes.
In 2016, Auditor General's report indicates that WASAC is among the institutions that failed to present financial statements for 2016. In the previous year, the report showed that there was about 40% of the unbilled water and that the Zove plant was producing below its installed capacity, significantly impacting on water shortage. So if you look at, cost recovery and look at the unbilled water and, of course, failing to present the financial settlement, you actually realize that the issue is with WASAC. not from outside, not from now. Actually, the population is at the cost of incurring expenses of unbilled water and all that, isn't it?
No, unfortunately not. And I will actually try to explain the two different things. The unbilled water that the Auditor General talked about is what we call technically the non-revenue water. That water has not passed through your water meter to start with. It has not passed through your water meter. It is within our network, and it is actually linked to the aging of the network. So that one is out of the question that we are actually billing to the normal customer, to the customer lambda. The other thing is actually that network is actually going to be done through the government investment. Again, this is not something that I'm actually pinching on your monthly bill. So the thing of actually putting, I think, the mismanagement or whatever issue that we might be having with the audits, these are actually on our mismanagement that we had in the development budget and so forth, of which we're actually trying to work on seriously. And to give you a number, actually, although Daya is actually doubting about the numbers, unfortunately they need to come back. The non-revenue water, when we, because we always have a reference, from in 1994 we had 60% and beyond of non-revenue water. By the time it was split into two, we had close to 42%. Today we are in a breach of between 35 to 37%. Again, this is actually not going to be very fixed because it is a fluctuation of different events that can actually happen. So we're working on that, and we are working towards 25% target by 2025. So there are things that mismanagement is not totally, and DG Rura is actually going to support me because we have very tight moments with Rura as well.
I also have something interesting. WASAC officials recently say that people tend to waste water when it's cheap, hence the new increased prices. Juliet, is that true? You actually waste water because it's cheap?
Oh, no. Now, that's the problem.
Yeah.
The way they are communicating to us, it's as if this is a punishment because you're wasting water. Now, when is the punishment ending? And then the punishment is you're including money into that, because that's the way they communicated to us. For the fact that people forgot about everything they said, they only focused on we are wasting water because we have it in abundance, which is not. People are paying more than 500 to get a jerry can of water. Someone told me recently that sometimes she doesn't wash her plate because she will use it again in the night so that she can wash it in the morning. That's how people are living.
People pay 100?
No, people are paying 500 per jerry can. I do pay when we don't have water.
So how true are these allegations that when water is cheap, people tend to waste it?
Let me chip in here. First of all, I think some of these came out of the press conference that we held at Rura. This was Mininfra, WASAC, and Rura. And there are some things that have been misrepresented, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Including the mindset.
That's a good example.
Yeah.
Actually, there are about three things. Yeah. One is the mindset. Not only did I not talk about mindset, I even never thought about mindset in the entire press conference. What I was actually talking about was, the correct English word would be perception. I mean, the press conference was in Kinyarwanda. What I was explaining was, if you look at the tariff and you look at the numbers objectively, you realize that the tariff, well, we cannot say water is cheap, but it's not, you wouldn't again say it's very expensive in terms of the pricing of the water. And so then I extended that by saying it's more of a perception.
And for us,
And then, like a perception that this water is very expensive. Well, I agree it's not cheap, but if you look at the tariff structure, it might be sometimes a bidding problem. If I saw people, for example, saying a month before I paid this amount, the following month I paid 5 times, 6 times, definitely that's a bidding problem. So I was trying to explain that because of different factors, you end up with a situation where you have a perception that water is very expensive when it is not necessarily expensive when you compare to the actual cost of producing it and the existing tariff. So that is the one of the things. The second one is also the thing about wastage of water. Again, what I was explaining was that we need to develop a culture of being conscious on how we utilize water. So if you listen to what I was saying in Kinyarwanda, because the press conference was in Kinyarwanda, I was emphasizing the need to develop a culture of being conscious on our usage of water. I've seen it in my own home. When water is not there and you buy jerry cans, you find that you end up using maybe a third of the amount of water that you normally use when the water is available in the tap. For the people who have cars in their homes, if you just come and watch from the time they start washing the car until the end, you realize that they could use a lot less water if that consciousness was there. These are the people in the home. And then also give an example. Sometimes you got, of course, many people go to work, and you don't really know the people at home, how much water they're using. And what I was calling people to do is to have this consciousness of following up to make sure water is properly utilized.
the consciousness, I understand, but the perception, do you think it cuts across all people, all families, all households? Probably it's just...
No, it was based on the flurry of messages on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Sorry, on WhatsApp as well, but mostly on Twitter, where there was an outcry about tariff. That's what I was actually responding to. To say, let's look critical and say, is this a fair price? And that's where the perception comes in. Now, back to what Dayo was saying earlier, that it's unreasonable to expect that you restore this through tariff. That's a different conversation again. The first conversation is this a fair tariff? Exactly. I'm going to go to that now. Go to that now. So the first conversation there is, first of all, is this tariff a cost-reflective tariff? And as I said, this one we've examined and re-examined. The numbers are there to see. So I don't think there. I don't know whether there has a problem there, but I don't think it is. Now it goes to the second question.
Very big problem. But I'll let you finish.
The second question. The second question then is, how do you recover this cost? And again, there are not many options. One is it has to be recovered through the tariff. The alternative is you have to get money somewhere to subsidize the tariff. And again, I said earlier, I don't speak for government. As a regulator, we set tariffs, but if something has to be subsidized, government has to decide. Because it's a trade-off. So then the question becomes, how much expectation do we have on our government in terms of financial resources? The government already subsidizes Mutuelle de Santé, it builds the roads, it invests in the infrastructure for the water, and on and on and on, and schools and everything. Does the government have the resources to subsidize it further because they're already subsidizing the investment? Good question. So I think the conversation then becomes different to say, okay, this is the cost, how do we recover it? And I think at the end of the day, the cost has to be recovered because otherwise WASAC will not be here to give us a service tomorrow if they cannot sustain that.
Dayo is, thank God, Dayo is seated right next to me and he has a number of receipts. He will probably tell us why he carried those receipts. But before we get there, before we get there, allow me to go for a short break and read some comments that are on Twitter. I know Twitter has been a buzz. Let me go for a short break and then I'll come back with some of your comments and opinion that you've been sending on Twitter.
ubuzima ni ingenzi kandi ubuzima ni urugendo ufite ubuzima nta cyiza atageraho iyo urwaye utakaza byinshi ni mu mwanya umara urwaye igihe cyo kwivuza utaretse n'ubushobozi uryamye aha ntaba arimo kwiteza imbere nyamara ubuzima burarindwa burabungabungwa yewe buranasigasirwa ibyo byose biterwa n'agaciro k'ibyo urya n'imyitozo ngororamubiri ukora inzira ni iyi rero ikiganiro cyacu kidufasha gusobanukirwa indwara zitandukanye ndetse no kuzirinda abaganga batandukanye b'inzobere tuzababagereraho badusangiza ubunararibonye bafite indwara zose mudasobanukirwa uru ni rwo rubuga inama zitandukanye ku mirire n'imyifatire niyo ntego y'ikiganiro buri gihe intero izahora ari yayindi menya wirinde
Welcome back. It's in focus, and we're talking about water. What has gone wrong with the water prices? What has gone wrong with the way WASAC distributes and gives us access to clean water? And here are some of the comments, many of them. The first one is Frank Muji. I believe it's Mujisha. Can we expect the price to be reduced once they reach their 2020 goal? That question goes to you, I guess. The two of you, but mainly Giselle. And of course, Rura, because you're the one who sets the prices. This one is Bosco Rusagara. In focus, these tariffs are insane, not only covering cost of production, but also water wastage during distribution leakages. They were regressively analyzed. You can't charge a household which uses 3 jerrycans and the other 8 a day, and at the end of the month. I think it's a thread that continues, and all pay 140,000 rand francs. This only creates economic inequality. Thank you so much, Bosco, for your comments. This one is from Akariza Keza Nwari. In focus. So what being expensive is down to our perception. If my wallet is empty, will changing my perception fill it up? Someone tell me, please. Thank you. Akariza. Asaf Masi Kabasha. Listen, I think Giselle is wrong that the customer is not affected by high non-revenue water levels. The water that is lost is already treated for a cost, and therefore someone will have paid that money. It's the consumer. Thank you. Akariza again, back here. How can WASAC Rura say that the cost of mismanagement is not only on the Rwandan people, but is being paid by the government? Do our taxes mean nothing? I guess it's a threat. Quite a number of comments from Akariza here, but let's jump on to Marion. Marion Umzirangoni. To be honest, though, you deputy CEO wa WASAC kunu okay, that was too much. Yes. Let me see. Richard Bishumba. Interesting in focus tonight. WASAC and Rura encouraging us to share water with neighbors if one has and another one doesn't. How do we split bills though? Over there, quite an interesting one. There are quite a number of comments. This is the one that I saw earlier today from David Mucho. We want to know the real reasons behind bill being risen 3 or 4 times the usual one. If one of the reasons is to teach citizens how to use water wisely, as it was said after they learned it is going to be reached. This is one of the quotes, I guess, from one of the officials' report. Let me see. Rwandans waste so much water as they want because they don't know its value. But let's talk about, first of all, Giselle, let me start with you. Did the water prices double, triple? What is it? Because I was looking at the numbers and perhaps I'm not the one who pays water. But tell us, what is it? If you read at some of the comments,
Yes.
even people don't seem to understand if those the prices doubled or tripled. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There is a block, the only block that was raised up to a factor of 2.14. So in any case, you should actually be having that. That is the block in between from 5 to 20 cubic meters. And the other one, you should not be having a factor beyond 1.6%, 1.6 dot. So what do I mean here is actually that where we really got a hike is actually from 331 to 720. And then where we actually got also the next block for the 845. That's where we have the important hikes in prices. Yeah.
There, tell us about your bills.
That were doubled. So it's only one.
No, I talked about two.
So it's 2 blocks.
Yes.
So the thing about these blocks, first of all, you're using increasing block tariffs, right?
Yes.
Which is the most popular tariff in the developing world, but also the most unjust and the most ineffective when it comes to cost recovery, which you've explained to us is your priority here, as opposed to our access to water. Increased block tariffs, the main problem they have, which research from the 90s has shown, is that this lifeline block, most of us, whether we're poor or we're not poor, we don't fall into that block. Especially when you're talking about serving low-income houses or low-income households. Low-income households are usually people who live in a building that serves multiple households, that shares a meter. You understand? So automatically, you find yourself as a poor person paying more than a wealthy person who has his own meter. Because once 5, 6 different households in one compound share a meter, their consumption goes way above whatever lifeline you have provided them. They will find themselves in the 845, 877, sometimes even more. So IBT, as in the increasing block tariffs, they're completely useless for making water affordable to those who are poor and who need it the most. The assumption has always been that poor people use less water than wealthy people, which is not true. It's actually the other way around, it's the inverse. If you look at just something like cooking, most of us who we have means, the food we acquire from outside, from the market, has a certain hygiene standard already. Poor people get sometimes the food out of the ground and have to wash it, have to use extensive water. These are households that generally family planning is not as effective or they're not as aware as people who are wealthy, so they have more children. My wife and I, we used to pay 2,000 to 3,000 per month. Once we got a baby, that cost doubled. So that's just one baby. We're not talking about poor people who have 3, 4 babies. They're sharing a meter, and you're now doubling something that you think is going to avoid them. You're trying to use the non-poor to subsidize the poor, which is fine. But the effect, the reality is that they do not fall into this lifeline block. No one does. That's one. 2, even the way you're calculating our bills is wrong. If my consumption is, let's say, 8 cubic, according to WASAC, I will pay 720 per cubic meter. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. But actually, the way you calculate IBT is my 8 cubic starts from this lifeline. It goes from 0 to 5, that's 340. So my first 5 cubics are supposed to be yes, that's how it's done.
No.
That's how it's done.
No, that's not how it's done.
The majority of countries that use IBT, that's how it's done, because it's just. The way you're doing it, you're basically taking the most expensive, you're exploiting a weakness in this tariff structure, which is you're moving everyone into one block, depending on their usage. But how it's supposed to be done, especially in a country as poor as ours, is that you do it in a just manner. You count from 0. I reach 5, I have paid 340 per cubic meter. I go beyond that, the next additional cubic is now 720, and so on. if my bill now that I got recently, my most recent bill is what, 6,900 francs. Okay, that's by your calculation. By the just calculation, by the fair calculation, I'm supposed to pay 2,500 less per month. That's just me. So imagine how much money we have been losing. And okay, granted, 2,500 is not much for me, but there are people, that's the difference between life and death to them. In a country where the average income is 50,000, you're playing with people's lives.
He has put numbers here.
Yes.
Quite interesting one.
Thank you very much. So let me talk about the tariff and let Giselle react to the billing, because I think billing is one thing where there might be, errors, or maybe somebody's not billed after 1 month, they come way into the second month, and then they're into the upper block. So let me explain something about the tariff. So first of all, he talked about the increasing block tariff. He didn't talk about the alternative. The increasing block tariff is still, it can have its own weaknesses, but it's still the most appropriate tariff methodology when you're talking of an environment where there are limited means. Because if you don't do an increasing block tariff, and for example, you set a flat tariff for everybody, so it means that the person who has a lot of means is paying the same price as the person who has limited means. I don't think you would say that is a fairer way of setting the tariff, and that's why we still use the increasing block tariff. That's number one. Number two, when you look at this tariff, the public tap tariff, actually there was 0% increase on the public tap. So that is the first thing. The second thing is that for somebody who uses up to 5,000 cubic meters of water, not more than that per month, there was a 5% increase, which is far less than even the inflation and everything. And so for people with limited means, now, of course, we can debate to say that people with less means use more water, but I don't think that is the case.
We have 3 minutes, sir.
Okay, because don't think that can be the case, because you cannot get somebody who has a big house with 6 rooms and they have to wash this house and they have 3 cars and they have so many machines in the house and all of this, and you think they use the same water as somebody with less requirements within the home, other than the very basic cooking and of course all this. So there is a very strong argument why many developing countries today still use the increasing block tariff. So unless you present the alternative, which is everybody probably pays the same, I think that is actually, I don't think it's a fair way to do it. Then there is a factor of where he said settlement, where people live in the same compound. I think here, this is WASAC now issue, where they need to come in and give each one a meter. That can be done. So that you don't have 3 families collectively ending up falling in a higher block. And finally, for the increasing block tariff, if you make everybody benefit from the lifeline tariff, so effectively, you are trying to subsidize everybody for the first. Now, what happens then? The overall tariff goes up because everybody is going to pay 340 for the 5 cubic meters. Again, the total cost hasn't changed. Ultimately, the total amount of money that has to be raised to be able to distribute this water and to sustain this service, the total cost hasn't changed, regardless of how you configure it. So if you want to subsidize 5 cubic meters, then for the rest, you need to hike them so high to make up for the shortfall.
Let me bring in Juliet. WASAC talks about water rationing system. Do you think it has been respected in your area?
Excuse me.
Rationing, tell you that today we're going to bring water and then tomorrow
Those
it has
are
not.
Promises after promises, and it's not been done because we've not been receiving water, and then today we are even paying higher price. Yeah, I don't know if they thought about the people where we have the same income from the last how many years. Where are we going to get this money? Yes, there are people who are not even going to understand all these prices and all these tariffs, but we also don't want this problem to end here. If our MPs could go, we can't afford that. We can't afford this. Yes, they have their reasons. We have where we want to be. We have where we want to be in the next 2 years, but they don't have to squeeze that money in our pockets because we can't afford it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Giselle, this could be probably your closing remarks, but tell us why this water rationing system has not been respected in some areas, and probably your closing remarks. Are we going to see water prices going down?
I mean, I'm actually very much open to any thing. It's actually that it's a debate that we can actually open. Yeah. But for the moment, we're seeing that being from the models that Rura did, seeing it fair at least to us. And then for the water rationing, yes, I do admit that there are areas where we don't keep our promises, but there are areas where we do keep our promises as well. And I will say why we don't keep our promises. If a water rationing, the day that you are meant to receive that water, let's say on Wednesday, and we get a leakage, then we might actually have a leap and then do some other techniques so that we can actually provide for that miss. And I'll come back to one of the comments on
20 seconds.
Yes, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
I do honor and actually respect people's taxpayers. I'm actually here because of them, and we appreciate the investment of the government. And yes, the mismanagement is something that we are actually working on. But what I was actually referring to is the versus non-revenue water, so that it doesn't affect the normal citizen under.
Thank you. Patrick, are we going to see water prices going down after reaching this target very quickly?
I don't think so, because we have to look at the operational cost. So that means the inputs have to go down for us. Operational cost, 2020 is most investment which already government is subsidizing. So that would not translate into reduced tariff. But let me say this. Yeah. We continue to be sensitive, especially to people with limited means. That's why the lower blocks, public tap, and the first block is really as low as it could be. The most hit people are middle-income people. We understand the demands on the lives on all of us, but at the same time, we need to work together as a country to make sure that not only do we get the service, but it's sustained.
Sure.
And of course, government is playing its part by investing in infrastructure. But together, I think the future is going to be much better than what it is today. But at the end of the day, we still need to find this money and make sure that we sustain the utilities.
Unfortunately, my director is telling me time is up, and this allow me to finish it here. The conversation will go on Twitter and everywhere, and behind the scene, of course. Thank you so much for watching, and of course, thank you so much for your contributions on Twitter, on Facebook, everywhere that we were able to send in your comments and your opinion. You heard it. They are not seeing the prices going down, according to Rura Director General. But let's wait and see. Probably a miracle might happen in future. From me and everyone, I am Ethan Tashubi, and have a good night. Up next is news in English.